One. Hello, hi, this is Omkar from BHyve, and today we're going to be talking with Praful and my very own co-founder Ketaki about the importance of diversity and inclusion at the workplace. Diversity and inclusion slowly is finding its place in one of the biggest corporate agenda in the last 5 to 10 years. But very little thought to action has actually been seen in the entire domain. And this is where we discuss it with, according to me, a fantastic subject matter expert on a particular domain of diversity and inclusion, and my very own co-founder who's had an ocean of corporate experience about what her experiences has been, and possibly identify what can be the new best practices when we try to ensure that there is sufficient or optimal amount of diversity and inclusion in the workspace. So before I start off, I just would want to request Praful to just give a quick introduction about him and how did he start getting inspired about the whole diversity and inclusion space, especially in corporate India.
So, hi, hello everybody. Thank you, Omkar Ketaki, for having me today here and for speaking about this topic, which most people do not delve into. It's very, bold of people to speak about, differences that exist because most people spend a lot of energy denying uh, differences, and then learning is that much more difficult from them because that's how it is. So um, I have been speaking about LGBTQ rights and equity as far as gender and sexuality is concerned for more than a decade now, and that being an Indian context, and we had a legal reason for it earlier on, and then um, when we move forward in the conversation, because the equity and social equity spectrum is not only about the legal stamp and identity of a person goes much more beyond. Uh, we looked at things like workplace inclusion and belonging there, and what are the barriers and what are the biases that uh, you know discourage a person from being authentic at workplace, being themselves at workplace, and discovered that this is not just a sexuality conversation and a gender conversation. This is something, a sentiment, a treatment, a situation or predicament that uh, anybody who's not mainstream candidate or employee per se goes through. Anybody who's different uh, per se goes through a certain kind of resistance, a certain kind of judgment at workplace, and that acts as a barrier from performing their best, from being catered to or heard, and obviously, you know, speaking about it is common sense um, and sheer platform with which we interact with people. Like we have a job fair called Vivid,
Mm,
and which is a diversity job fair.
mm.
So thousands of people are in touch with us uh, automatically through that,
Mm.
and we get an interface with corporate. So this is pretty much a conversational space that exists tangibly, and we would like to bring a change. So
So for both of you, I have my next question. You know, you have both of been being dwelling in the corporate space, Ketki, typically corporate space in the US, you over here in India and other places as well. Let's start with a good story and a bad story. You know, I want you to tell me one corporate instance where you experienced that, hey, this company really cares about diversity and inclusion. And there's another instance where you were like, hey, wait a minute, does this corporate even have the letters D and I in their alphabet? So just tell me a good story and a bad story so our listeners will be able to distinguish what a good, positive DNI workspace looks like and what it does not look like. So let's start with you, Ketki. If you have a good
Oh,
story and a bad story.
yeah. I think the company I worked for in the US, Viacom, had extremely good diversity and inclusion practices. But the one thing that really warmed my heart was they had this program called Girls Who Code, which they had partnered with, I think, with Ernst and Young for. And so every summer and essentially every semester, there were these high school girls or undergrad girls who would come to the workplace and spend 4 hours, 6 hours learning coding from employees, and then also actively participating as, with kiddie gloves in like the new apps that Viacom was creating, and the new projects that they were working on. And I mean, obviously the effort was done by the HR team and, led by them. But like my boss, the CTO, would personally go and attend the events, hang out with pizza parties with the girls. And so it was like, you talk about women in STEM, and pick them young, but they were actually doing it. And the energy was just fantastic. So I loved that Girls Who Code. This is my favorite experience by far.
And which experience would you classify, of course, without naming the company, where you were like, what? Seriously, guys?
I mean, I would not say it's a company, but I would say I have friends who are in like the investment banking space, and that's like a traditionally male dominated domain. It's like, I have friends who tried to break into it, got into those rotational programs where 6 months they were like investment bankers, and they got the job offer, but the environment was so not conducive that they had to, let go of that opportunity, get for a sales role or an account role instead. So investment banking as a whole just has that bro code vibe to it, which is in my mind, it's just really difficult to break. So nobody's successfully done it so far.
All right, interesting. And how about you, Praful? What would you narrate, or which incident would you like to narrate, or a company would you like to point which really got their D&I agenda right, and which one is the one which completely tossed it upside down?
So again, the thousands of instances, right? Because A, I'm too old. B, been in the domain for a while, and daily there is a new experience, right? And good and bad is a very relative and very binary way of looking at it. A memorable one for sure was an employee from IBM walking up on stage of Kashish, which is um, one of top 5 global LGBT film festivals, and the kind of cinema that is showcase there are humane stories, which are very rich in narratives which will generally not find a space, right? And for something like that to be showcased is usual because we see it year after year. But somebody who wears drag or cross dresses and officially represents a company as a VP, senior VP, and is from the sponsor side, not for the shenanigan part of it.
Yep.
Give me just. Can we stop? Pause. Can we take that again? Yeah.
And Praful, how about you? What, according to you, would have been a great company which got its D&I agenda right, and which one the worst, where they actually toppled the entire D&I agenda upside down, or whatever, an incident where you could associate these good and bad associations to it?
So I keep repeating this part, but good and bad relative terms, right? It's like black and white. A lot of gray exists, and 98% gray exists. So without being biased, a memorable one would be an IBM employee walking up on Kashish stage. Kashish is one of the top 5 global LGBT film fests, and which is pretty much homegrown in India. And walking up on that stage as the authentic self can mean many things. Being out as a LGBT person is one, but when you're officially representing a sponsor and you're talking about your designation, and your designation is VP and above or whatever, practice head, etc., and you can go up on the stage and say that, hey, this is me, I am cross-dressing, or I'm in drag, or I'm in whatever kind of attire, and I can officially talk about the brand without it feeling threatened insecure, me feeling any kind of fear of rebuttal or whatever,
Mhm.
and say that, hey, my profession and its efficiency is where it is, and uh, not being ashamed or not fearing in any way about it. That's a great space to be. And IBM's policies, as much as we've engaged and seen in past, are pretty robust and pretty brilliant, inclusive as far as things are concerned. Um, and apart from that, we also have a lot of companies that do lip service,
Mhm.
spread the mess and be messiah.
Yeah.
So, uh, without naming them again,
Mhm.
one of the top championing brands in India, which talks about LGBT inclusion and rainbow flags and rainbow logos, and uh, you know a lot of social media publicity and a lot of
Mhm.
uh, leader conversation that is done. Uh, they pay something as basic as 5,000 rupees a month to a transgender intern. And if that's the sum that they make, there is no safe access to
Anything.
home, shelter,
Yeah.
Yeah.
or even a toilet,
Mhm.
which might be very primary basic needs, because you're not even providing something that covers the essential. And the person might work 9 to 10 hours a day during internship
Mhm.
on ground, and uh, that's just uh, you know being non-discriminatory in oppression, but it's more like that.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of slip between what people talk and what people
What
walk,
people say. Yeah.
in
I
corporate space as well.
I totally agree, and somewhere I also believe that this whole diversity and inclusion dialogue, like if we just look up our history books, there has to back in 1950, Ambedkar ensured that this kind of a problem does not occur for people who belong to various castes and creed across the Indian society. Later it begged us to start emphasizing that, hey, you know what, diversity and inclusion is also running beyond caste. It's be running into people with limited abilities to execute certain jobs, people who have sexual orientation which matters more to them than to the society. Then there have been, of course, glass ceilings for women in the corporate space. So I really want to understand both of your views, and starting from you, Praful, again, that can you think about one effective way where we can start integrating this issue at hand in culture so that it becomes like second nature? Nobody has to keep on emphasizing or investing in promoting diversity and inclusion agenda, because can it get changed at such a fundamental level that it can be like a second nature of everybody in the company, and it need not be talked about because there is one fundamental change which has occurred at the ground level? So what would you say on that?
So that requires people to go beyond the mandate part of diversity and inclusion, right? There is diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging.
Hmm.
Diversity exists,
Hmm.
just like biodiversity exists, just like neurodiversity exists.
Hmm.
Diversity exists in multiple ways. Humans exist in all shapes, sizes, origins, and wherever that they come from. Communities that belong to a geography, communities that belong to a certain kind of, you know, class, caste, XYZ. It's always there across humanity. It does exist. Um, Including requires will,
Hmm.
Mhm.
and starts with empathy enough to listen to a person, or listen to that person's experience in their own language, in their own words, in their own manner. And yeah, keeping space for people to express authentically and without question, without diluting, without interpreting and analyzing, and really giving it our own context and narrative. If
Hmm.
that is welcomed, as much as we think it is difficult, just letting that part of, listening to authentic narratives exist, and the power of that is so big
Mhm.
that people do reflect and then change, and they start relating, they start, you know, working on it. Programming changes. It's literally programming, because cultural programming exists, cultural baggage exists,
Mhm.
and yeah, course correction happens just with that. So if in organizations we keep room for not just dialogue but sharing
Mhm.
authentic narratives, even if it is our own or somebody from, our kind of origins, backgrounds, XYZ, and blah, with somebody who doesn't understand or know it. Just that kind of authentic, basic exchange.
Mhm.
That's a world of wonder.
Perfect. Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Katie, how about you? What would you think that at a fundamental level, if something changed, the topic of DNI would be unimportant?
Yeah, I think like my thoughts are I would build on what Praful is saying, that you have to look. It's a cultural change, but you have to look beyond. I think not just look beyond, but also focus. And so oftentimes, you say, okay, actions speak louder. So as leadership, or as can the organization as a culture focus away from the things that make us diverse to the things that we're all looking for, which is the skills that employees are bringing, the capabilities that they're, highlighting those, as opposed to highlighting, what gender you are or what age you are. So like, can when people are being looked at, be looked at as a sum capability of their skills and see what they bring to the table, not just to the table in terms of how you are delivering on your work, but what you are bringing to the table for your fellow colleague
Mhm.
to sort of gain from. So I will look at Praful, or I will look at a female colleague of mine, not as a diversity, but as a sum together of the skills that they have, that they're adding to the workplace, and that they can give me sort of in an exchange experience. And so you're moving away from looking at people as
Mhm.
tokens and looking at people as the capabilities that they bring. And it's also like an inclusive way to say, I feel valued in the organization because they see what I'm bringing every day to the work. So like that kind of peer exchange and capabilities kind of a approach, especially being driven down from the top, saying, I love this girl because she's fantastic at what she does, and this is what she can teach you,
Mhm.
is like a cultural mind shift that I think can then take away the diversity forced conversation that we have to have, because you will relook at the way you're looking at people.
So look at a person's skill sets, look at a person's knowledge
Mhm.
rather than looking at a person's ability, disability, sexual orientation,
Correct.
culture, caste, creed, whatever, right?
Yes, yes, 100%.
Okay, perfect. Lovely.
Okay.
All right, perfect. Diversity and inclusion as an agenda has come onto the Indian corporate space, if I could say, in the last 10 years or 15 years, let's say. Uh, a very simple question. What can a corporate lose out on? What is this corporate dystopia? What can a corporate lose out if they do not have diversity and inclusion as an area of investment, as an area of repair, as an area of focus? Because a chief operating officer would want to sign off a check of, say, for example, 3 crores, 5 crores, 1 crore towards this cause, and then he's like, "Isse mera fayda kya hoga?" Another way to actually look at it is like, what is the company losing if they don't start investing towards a DNI agenda within the organization? So what do you think? Ketki, let's go with you first.
Um, I think you have to think about the larger context of uh, uh, what is the kind of talent you are attracting, because the
Mhm.
kind of image that you then create for your organization is the kind of culture breeds culture, right? So if you are not taking care to ensure that you are building a holistic, a balanced kind of a um, workplace, then that's the kind of the rot deepens. It's a dirty way to put it, but that's the point, right? So for your future, you need to ensure that you are taking the right decisions. Is what is like my first thought, and what CEO or COO needs to worry about.
So the biggest damage, according to you, Ketki, is a lost opportunity, maybe in employer branding, or maybe even a negative employer brand.
Hiring. Yeah.
It
I mean, I
valid.
know I would not apply to certain roles in certain companies knowing that they have a certain culture which is not inclusive. I would be like, it's fine, missed out for them, not for me.
Praful, what about you? What organizational loss companies might have if they don't invest or have focused D&I discussions in their agenda?
So engaging employee or the human aspect that
Mhm.
is there of our workplace, the satisfaction, there is sense of achievement beyond just our
Mhm.
professional attributes, right? There is a lot of it that we bring to our workplace, and there is a holistic experience that happens. Do do our mundane hourly logs and our interactions within a certain framework with our colleagues, peers, and supervisors, do they cover our need to be engaged with our workplace?
Mhm.
Like our deepest friendships often are colleagues, right? Would you cherish them? Would you take them forward? Would you create your you know um, career path, promotional paths with them, without them?
Mhm.
And if you do that, you'll do it with diversity of experiences, because it's not just good experiences that you'll carry forward. You'll need
Yeah.
diversity of experiences. They come from various kind of peoples and various kind of situations, right?
Mhm.
Monotony is not something that humans enjoy any which way. So holistic growth is what uh, holistic growth is what companies lose out on normally. Training wise, in US, around 70 to 80 billion is what is spent annually in corporate training.
Mhm.
Attrition rates are through the roof, and that's why training is done again and again. And an average um employee spends 1% of their a week's time in self-paced learning.
Mhm.
Peer learning steps in there, right? Like that is where a person would get inspired by somebody else.
Mhm.
How probable is it that you learn from somebody who thinks just like you, and who speaks just the language that you speak,
Mhm.
and who makes the connection, joins the dot in the same manner that you do? So there's very little to learn there, very little to grow there. You will learn from multiple things. So company loses out on all of that. And yeah,
Yeah, I think fair enough because sometimes I wonder.
pause. What were
Yeah,
you coming
interesting.
up with?
Because working in corporations which have had both a decently good DNI agenda versus the ones which completely turned a blind eye. When you talk people who come from really diverse background and let's say challenged background, because India as a society might not have been the most kind to such people with disabilities, with their preferences about sexual orientation or even color. And even though through those hardships, when they end up landing a job at a great organization, imagine the kind of resilience that person has, and imagine the kind of dedication and ambition that person has, and imagine working with these people. And let's say I humbly accept that I come from a decently privileged background, so imagine working and rubbing shoulders with such people. I think it's just going to be super super inspiring. And that's where I want to introduce the next part of this dialogue, where what according to you can break these barriers between, as you said, that the monotonous people who look similar, who dress similar, who think similar, unfortunately. What is a way where you can start thinking about building bridges between people who are, say, different towards people who are, say, not different? What is your weapon of choice in the corporate space in order to build bridges which does not come top down, which does not come from the leadership, but can start at a employee level to start building these bridges?
Should I go first?
Okay, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Okay, yeah. No, I think the difference that you said was stuff that can be done top down versus stuff that can happen at, at an employee level, or at a level where you are at the mass level, the foundational level. And so I have one example of that, where one company I was working with was not very, I don't want to say their problem was exactly diversity and inclusion, but they had problems about who's allowed to speak up and who's tolerated when they speak up versus who isn't. So it's sort of like diversity and inclusion. It wasn't as it is, yeah, Praful. It wasn't as pointed against women, but it definitely had that. And so the example there is that while the rest of the environment was not friendly, my particular manager made sure that she knew what the difficulties of that environment are, and so she was like vocal about how to navigate them. And so learning from her experiences was to me such a big example, saying, when you're doing this, think about this thing. When you are trying that, when you're making a pitch, what are the things you need to talk about? So like that kind of interaction that I used to have with her helped me navigate through the environment of that workplace and ensure that I was still able to get the work done from like the tricky people, or I was able to keep certain, certain tasks that are given to you at bay by saying, hey, I'm not a rookie, I'm not a newbie. So, I really valued, while it still was like a manager to, associate relationship, I still valued the peer experiences of learning. She would come and tell me, ye mere sath hua hai, in short, this doesn't happen to you. When you are taking this pitch, make your thinking straight. So I think those interactions, those learning experiences, happening in everyday life, whether you're sitting over coffee or you are brainstorming together, are tremendously helpful. And so that kind of peer interaction, peer learning, Praful hinted at it, is the first thing I can think of from my own experience.
What about you, Praful? What's your take on that?
So I clearly think lived experiences top the chart. They are the coolest thing ever, because if you've seen, right from childhood, if people are pampered and they go for storytelling to their grandparents and almost demand to learn from the life experiences and the richness of narrative that comes from there, or traditional XYZ. All of us have seen that, right? If only you could hear somebody else's grandparents talk to you, and their truths come and their narratives come to you, that would be so brilliant at age of 5. But today, at least hand-me-downs are coming to you. At least somebody who's bought a legacy of previous company is coming to you. Somebody is bringing a lived experience of maybe changing careers from X to Y, and like Omkar was talking, that somebody with a certain marginalization or certain ability and certain kind of or say disadvantage per se, and if the person has overcome and overgrown and outgrown that whole space and aced it, there is such rich stuff for us to get inspired and learn from, if we just allow ourselves to do that. It is something as basic as getting out of our own way by not letting our biases stop us from benefiting from all of this. Like for me to talk about people beyond my political ideology, to know that some people might be phobic to my sexual orientation, and for me to smile and say that it will still remain my business, and they can do precious little about it, and not taking it personally, or not really saying that makes them XYZ kind of person, and maybe going beyond that, maybe going beyond a lot of stuff that is a personality trait. And if we don't function from biases, they don't become barriers. Barriers happen when biases are magnified, when our shortcomings are not stopped in track, when our personal preferences are not projected over somebody else.
Perfect. I think, Ketki and you both are steering towards peer learning, which obviously has to be our topic of interest because of the efforts what we're putting in helping organization weave that fabric. Praful, I want to understand that, what are the barriers for peer learning when we are typically talking about different people, again, on the basis of origin, race, sexual orientation, color, ability, disability, and how is it inhibiting organizations to grow in holistically and also like individuals to grow? Like, where do you find all these barriers, and which are those according to you?
We're not we're not really encouraged to be honest
Mm-hmm.
and ask for you know help in learning, and to actually create our own space of learning from peers. It's not. Generally, the first response would be, do not hang out with your peers so much that you lose your
Mm-hmm.
individual, you know, approach
Time.
to career.
Mm-hmm.
And we're like, workplaces are not places for friendships. Or does that person even have something valuable to offer you? Tangibility of things and skills, etc. It's done. Skill mapping is looked upon in a very funny manner. Barrier is
Mm-hmm.
the manner in which we are coding these conversations. Like, nobody understands cost and cost management better than a sex worker.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And do we see them in that light?
Mm-hmm.
The risk management that is there in a profession like that,
Yeah.
the kind the kind of stuff that somebody like that sees, it's a very different mind game and ball game. And if we say that bankers can learn from them, so learning is defined in a very stereotypical, linear manner, in a very old school manner till now. Skill mapping is done in a very mm,
Degree driven way.
textbook theoretical manner,
Academic.
and
Yeah.
exchange is not really promoted, though there is a lot of conversation about it. Gamified experience is so brilliant that it catches on. There's a huge dearth and need for it, and which is why you see um, people flocking when something uh, brings them together. Something as small as Pokemon Go will have so many people overnight, and anything that goes viral, that has engagement.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, KBC is a brilliant knowledge sharing platform. My father says, "Oh, I didn't know that." He's willing to learn from television with that,
Mm-hmm.
but not with something else. At a certain point of time, there used to be Surbi that used to tell you like lesser known facts.
Yeah.
But today you're not going to log into Discovery or History or something like that and actually sit through that 20 minutes and see that show, even if it is about culture that you are fond of.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And how many people have um, these kind of learning documentaries and things on their Netflix watch list,
Mm-hmm.
even if individually doing. If together,
Mm-hmm.
think, pair, share is a mantra that I give to most people.
Mm-hmm.
That think of what you would like to, where there is a need to couple up and learn and do either buddy system or mentor system, or give something that gives you so much of joy that sharing it could, multiply it in your life and blah, some skill. Um, there are some people who are mad about mathematics, and that's not been my trip in life, but just to see that it transcends into architecture, that it is that in so many ways, in biodiversity for that matter, and sacred geometry, to so many design concepts. That is something that is fun for me. I would just flip it and see it like, oh, this is how proportions work as far as design is concerned, and graphics wise, this is how it will work in my context. So, so it is brilliant there.
Yeah. I really like that quote that, hey, why can't you learn cost and account and a lot of abstract things from a sex worker? Because I'm pretty sure that there's a very good chance that they would end up doing a better job than what's happening at Wall Street right now with the hedge fund managers, right? Ketki, you've been working alongside me, leading a peer learning revolution at the workplace. But where would you see that challenges can occur in the concept of peer learning, where you're trying to deal with, let's say, a conservative workforce, which is a little shows a little bit of resistance towards people who are not so similar to them. Where do you see the challenge, and where do you see the solution?
Um, I think the challenges are inherent in people's behaviors, and so a lot of it will have to be with bringing forth the achievement of participation. Like that's the major push, saying eventually everybody's like, what's in it for me? So the opportunity of learning, the opportunity of whether it is the rewards or whether it is your own upskilling and what that can do for you in the organization has to become like a big push to get people to participate in a platform of this kind. But I think my thought on this is that, as with any change is slow. You're not going to be able to change people's mind with a flick of a wand. So it's going to be a process that you go through. You put them through the different stages of doing gamification, doing peer learning, showing the reward that comes in it, whether it is through leadership participation or monetary rewards or what have you. And then over time you start seeing that biases which did exist will slowly, over time, I'm not saying, like I said, it's going to happen in like 3 दिन में खत्म हो गया, ठीक हो गया, everything is fine now. It's not something that's going to happen. There are so many factors that will come into play with, like, what is the average age of the people who are actually using the platform? Youngsters who are in cities versus tier 2, tier 3 folk could have like different reactions or different timelines as to how they react to what the platform is trying to do in terms of learning also, but in terms of diversity and inclusion. So I think the big barrier is keeping the patience to see the rewards in terms of the learning that happens, and also in terms of the diversity and inclusion that we can bring with a platform like BHyve and the idea of peer learning.
Perfect. Lovely. Now this steers me to the last question, and I really like this question. I'll give a little bit of background that if you randomly take a survey across India, and you possibly ascertain that there is a certain segment of the workforce which belongs to differently abled or of people of different race, origin, sexual orientation, there's a very high chance that they are the ones which fall in the disengaged category, right? You have the engaged employees, you have the unengaged employees, and you have the disengaged employee. Now, Praful, you are a CHRO of a large organization, and this has come to your notice that, hey, there is high amount of disengagement within the folks who are different. What would your stance be, or what would your investment be, or where would you actually, what your first 1, 2, 3 steps be to make sure that there is high amount of burnout also with these people, because they're not only trying to do their job, but they're also trying to fight against the other people mentally about normalizing their differences, right? So there's high amount of burnout over there. There's high amount of unengagement, or rather disengagement over there. So Praful, the CHRO, Praful, the CEO of the company, what would you end up investing, or what kind of actions you would take in order to normalize this entire situation?
Okay, so unfortunately in India, most of the teams do not have space to employ and onboard people who are different. That's the barrier that really prevents people from being in a team. So if somebody is different, they will hide it.
Mm-hmm.
And they would not even, because it supposedly affects productivity. That's the first bias. If there is a single person, like a mother who's there who has a young child, will try to make to every call on time and blame themselves, saying that, hey, I have such a demanding parallel personal life, and that's internalization of guilt and of a lot of wrongness. Um, First of, hey, it's okay. Everybody has unique circumstance, kind of a conversation. That being a language and ability to listen and flexibility. Flexibility in terms of timeline, delivery, XYZ, can't exist just like that in many organizations. But you know what is the ratio and what is the kind of percentile to which you can give it. Honestly offering that. If I have a 9 times out of 10 kind of leeway and I can give that 10% to somebody saying that, hey, 1% is what I can afford because that works within all of my system to make space for that. I would make space for that one time the person not having pressure and not crumbling under that, saying that, hey, listen, I understand. Why don't you pick the slot of the time according to you? Because you have a young child. Your waking sleeping hours are, different. Somebody who has accessibility issues, infrastructure wise, and maybe my office does not have um, the loo that is used by people of all genders in a certain manner, or people who can access it with a wheelchair with ease and whatever. Work from home as a conversation to be given to somebody like that, and today it is much more possible than what it was last year. The world has gone through
I was just, yeah.
the kind of flexibility that we are looking at. So as a CHRO today, I have much more at hands, and it is much more viable, and it is much more the empowerment is another level.
Perfect. Lovely. Let's ask the CEO of BHyve about when BHyve becomes a larger organization than what it is right now. What kind of investments would you put towards ensuring that people belonging to diverse everything, in fact, are engaged, they don't experience burnout? How would you undo these challenges, essentially, of how would you undo the challenges of people belonging to different everything? I like that word, different everything.
Yeah. So I actually thought of this answer just like Praful did, pre-pandemic and post-pandemic. Pre-pandemic, you would have to do like significant investments, whether it is in infrastructure like accessible bathrooms, or having daycares for women who have little kids, or men who have little kids who they have to, it's a possibility. And so pre-COVID, obviously a lot of investment in creating those systems, and then waiting for the rewards on that. Like, I know an organization which started a daycare, and then because they didn't see enough kids, they shut it. And I said, nahi, parap, you keep the thing, and eventually people will gain the confidence to come there. Again, it's a thing of patience. So pre-COVID, it would have been a lot of investment in hard infrastructure. But I think now with COVID and our whole digitalized experience of workplaces and meetings and everything, flexibility is the biggest gift you can give to all employees. Having them sort of structure how they want to work from, where they want to work from. One of the things that I've now come to realize when we're looking at hiring is a lot of people want to have 100% remote jobs where they're willing to commit extra hours, provided you let them stay wherever their families are, in smaller towns, in remote locations. And so flexibility in how the work is structured, how meetings are structured is I would say, the biggest gift you can give to your workforce, to ensure that they are happy, engaged, not burnt out, and delivering the work that you want them to do every day for n number of years. So I think flexibility is the biggest thing. The second thing is celebration. To me, being seen helps me in realizing what is okay to be shown. So like when I was at a company, there were some 16 department heads, and out of those there was just one department head who was a female, and we never saw her because our teams, like the whole department, the whole unit would have events. They would have those parties, whatever, um, happy hours, so on and so forth. She was never there because she was always slogging and working. She had extra work pressure because she was like, if I have 2 hours, I'm going to try to finish my work and go back home quickly to my kids. And so not seeing her having fun was really indicative to me that if I grow into this role, I'm going to be her who's not going to have fun. I'm going to be the one who's going to be skipping lunch, hangouts, because I want to go and use that time to do my workout so that I can take the earlier train and go home. Like all of these things which I saw her not do was difficult for me to then use in my mind. So like celebrating the diversity by showing its positives, like that's something we would do at BHyve, where we're like, here is an achievement you need to acknowledge, we need to celebrate this behavior. And then that becomes the role model, the examples. We talk about this when it comes to representation. So I think that kind of seeing is really important. So that would be like my step, my other action plan for sure.
Perfect. I can't wait to work under you for that. I think we've come a long way. I still remember the first time I was laughing in a very hurtful manner. There was this one episode. I think it was one of the early episodes of The Office, where Michael Scott is trying to hold a diversity and inclusion training in the conference room. And the way he's trying to address Kelly Kapoor, the actress with Indian origin, is by enacting a horrible Indian accent about, do you want to cook tea? Yeah, until he gets slapped in the face, and then simultaneously calling Oscar, who's a gay accountant, on calling him out on every time until and unless it's normalized. So we pretty, as much as I like Michael Scott as a character, I'm pretty sure that the world's moved on of not having people like Michael Scott at the workplace. And I think we are the people who would likely be in the front line towards bringing this change. Yeah, Praful, you want to add something?
I'm glad that we are just having this conversation, and the way that it's taking shape. It's,
Mm-hmm.
it's it's nice that we have examples, we remember anecdotes, and there is enough room for racial diversity, for all kind of things to be addressed without the baggage of the isms that are there associated with it. It scares a lot of people generally, you know, because when you talk about women in authentic form, oh my God, feminism. When you're talking about any kind of social justice conversation, you immediately become an activist. So these isms that are scary and that really drive people away, and we're talking about them without it being a big deal, even if somebody mm, has not been able to do something successfully and they've made that attempt. You're talking about their personal capacity as a character, as well as their action separately, and it's a very wise thing to do, right? So that's something, that's a brilliant takeaway for everybody, and all of us have that capacity. So I'm just glad that it's going there.
Perfect. So this has been a good conversation. I think a much needed conversation. And of course, this is not lip service. I think we at BHyve 6 Degrees conscious efforts towards making sure that it's not one PR move what big giants do by putting a rainbow flag on their logo, but it's a conscious effort, not only conversations. And I think these conversations are going to trigger a better wave. So thank you so much for joining in, Praful. And I'm going to be a little courteous to thank my co-founder as well. Thank you so much, Ketaki.
But yes, thank you, Praful, for coming. We're really glad to have you with us.
Thank you so much.
Perfect.